The moment Daniel Mercer touched the dead engine, everyone in the launch garage turned like he had committed a crime. Not because the engine was running. It had not run all morning. Not because he had broken anything. His hand had only closed around the edge of the rear pressure rail, just long enough to stop a young technician from connecting the startup line. But inside Crane Velocity Motors, a poor single dad with grease on his sleeve was allowed to clean around greatness. Not question it. The Crane VX-12 prototype engine, Unit SVX-12R, sat on a black steel test stand under white lights. Matte black covers open. Metallic piping exposed. Harness leads hanging like nerves. Around it stood 12 engineers, 3 executives, 2 cameras for the investor live stream rehearsal, and Vanessa Crane, the billionaire CEO who had promised the world that this engine would change the future of American performance cars. "Take your hand off my engine," Vanessa said. Her voice cut through the garage so cleanly that the room seemed to obey before Daniel even moved. Daniel released the rail and stepped back. He was 38, tired around the eyes. With a gray work shirt that still carried old oil no washing machine could fully defeat. He had been hired for temporary shop floor support. Half mechanic, half cleanup crew. The kind of contract worker people noticed only when he was in the way. Behind the open bay door, his 8-year-old daughter Lily stood with her small blue toy car pressed against her chest. School had closed early for a maintenance issue, and Daniel had no one else to watch her. She had been told to stay by the office window. But when adults start shouting at your father, windows do not keep a child from hearing. Vanessa walked toward him slowly, heels striking the sealed concrete. "Do you understand what you just interrupted?" Daniel looked once at the pressure rail, then at the small red seal tag clipped near the feed line. "Yes," he said. A startup prep with the wrong seal on the rail. Someone behind Vanessa laughed under his breath. Owen Pike, head of engineering, folded his arms and shook his head as if Daniel were a stain on the floor. "It's a visual inspection tag," Owen said. "Contract staff don't review it." Daniel kept his voice low. "That tag is covering a rail that failed variance. You should not pressurize it for a demo." The laughter stopped, but only because the accusation was too dangerous to be funny. Vanessa's face did not soften. It sharpened. "You were brought in to move tool carts, wipe down benches, and keep this garage camera ready. You are not on my engineering team." Daniel glanced toward Lily. She was watching him with big, frightened eyes. The toy car squeezed so tightly its chipped blue roof dug into her palm. "I'm telling you because if that rail spikes under heat, the shutdown logic may not catch it in time." Owen stepped forward. "That is nonsense." Vanessa did not look at Owen. She looked at Daniel's boots, his faded shirt, and the contractor badge clipped crookedly to his pocket. "Mr. Mercer, you are done here. Effective immediately. Security will walk you out." The sentence landed harder on Lily than it did on Daniel. He had been fired before. Contract men learned to carry rejection like a second lunchbox. But Lily had never seen a room full of adults decide her father was disposable. She stepped through the office doorway, still holding the blue toy car. Dad Vanessa turned and saw her for the first time. For half a second, something like inconvenience crossed the CEO's face. Then she said, louder than necessary, "Take your daughter and leave before you cost this company its launch." Daniel did not argue. He did not plead. He picked up his tool bag, slung it over one shoulder, and walked toward Lily. But before he reached her, his eyes passed over the rear of the engine again. And that was when he saw the edge of a small calibration plate under the pressure rail bracket. It was almost hidden by shadow and a bundle of black harness leads. Most people would have seen a piece of metal no larger than 2 fingers. Daniel saw the position, the angle, and the old mounting pattern. His breath changed. The plate was not supposed to be on this revision unless someone had copied an emergency safety layout from the old VX program. And if they had copied it, then the shutdown logic had a name. Mercer Safe. Reu David. Daniel had not heard that phrase spoken inside a crane building in years. Owen followed his gaze and shifted half a step, deliberately blocking the plate. That movement told Daniel more than the plate itself. If you have ever watched someone humble get treated like they were nothing, stay with this story. Tell me where you are listening from. Because what happens next is not about revenge for a fired man. It is about a father who saw danger in a room full of pride and made one call that powerful people could not ignore. Security did not touch Daniel, but they walked close enough to make the message clear. Lily stayed beside him all the way through the corridor, past the polished display wall showing Crane's race victories, past the glass conference rooms where people in suits pretended not to look. Her blue toy car clicked softly against the zipper of her jacket with each step. In the parking lot, the sound of the building disappeared behind them, replaced by wind, distant traffic, and the dull ache that comes after public humiliation. Daniel opened the passenger door of his old pickup. Lily climbed in, then looked back at the headquarters as if it had grown teeth. "Did you do something bad?" she asked when Daniel got behind the wheel. The question was not accusation. It was fear searching for a shape. Daniel sat with his hands on the steering wheel. The investor banners on the building showed Vanessa Crane smiling beside a slogan about fearless innovation. "No," he said. "I touched something I should not have had to touch." Lily stared down at the toy car. "Then why did she fire you?" Daniel started the engine of the pickup and let it idle for a moment. Because some people think being in charge means they are already right. He wanted to stop there, to protect her from the bigger truth. But Lily had seen too much already. So he added, "And because I may have seen something they did not want anyone to notice." Their garage was 20 minutes away, tucked behind a row of storage units near the edge of town. Mercer Auto and Repair had once been a small but honest shop with 3 bays, 2 regular helpers, and a waiting area where Emma Mercer used to keep coffee fresh for customers. Now only 1 bay worked. The waiting room lights flickered, and a yellow notice was taped to the office door. Daniel took it down before Lily could read it. But she knew the shape of trouble by now. "Is that about the rent again?" she asked. Daniel folded the notice and put it in his back pocket. "We have 9 days," he said. "I'll handle it." Lily did not answer. Children who have lost one parent learn early when not to ask how. Inside, the garage smelled like dust, rubber, and old coffee. Daniel set his tool bag on the bench and washed his hands in the deep sink. The water ran gray, then clear, but the lines in his fingers stayed dark. Lily climbed onto the stool near the workbench and parked her blue toy car beside a stack of invoices. It had been Emma's last birthday gift to her, bought at a hospital gift shop when Emma was still trying to make ordinary moments out of impossible days. Daniel saw it and looked away too quickly. Sometimes grief did not arrive as crying. Sometimes it arrived as a little blue car sitting under fluorescent lights. "What did you see?" Lily asked. Daniel dried his hands slowly. "A safety marker. Like a warning sticker, not exactly." He opened the bottom drawer of his old metal file cabinet and pulled out a plastic storage folder tied with string. Inside were old diagrams, calibration notes, a few printed emails, and a photo of a younger Daniel standing in front of a crane test bay before life had carved so much from his face. Lily leaned closer. "You worked there before?" Daniel nodded. "A long time ago. Before your mom got sick. Before you remember much." He pulled out a page marked VX Safety Override Development and placed it flat on the bench. The words on the page would have meant nothing to most people. And Daniel was not about to turn his daughter into an engineer in one night. He pointed only to a small sketch of a plate mounted behind a pressure rail. "This was part of an emergency shutdown system," he said. "If pressure rose too fast, the engine was supposed to protect itself before anything dangerous happened." Lily traced the air above the sketch. Careful not to touch the paper. And the engine today had that. Daniel nodded. It had the plate, but the seal on the rail looked wrong, and Owen moved in front of it when he saw me notice. Lily frowned. So they knew Daniel did not answer at first. That was the problem. If Owen knew, then this was not a mistake. It was a cover. He searched his old phone archive next. Then an external drive that took 3 tries before the garage computer recognized it. Folder after folder opened from another life. VX support memos. Safety variance notes. Shutdown calibration drafts. He found the one he was afraid he would find just after sunset. Mercer safe. Rev no. Emergency pressure override. Manual notation do not bypass under live demo conditions. Daniel sat back in his chair. The fluorescent light buzzed above him. Lily had fallen asleep curled on 2 waiting room chairs. Her toy car still in one hand. Daniel looked at her. Then, at the note on the screen, and heard Emma's voice as clearly as if she had just stepped out of the office with 2 cups of coffee. If something is dangerous, she had said once, during a fight about whether he should risk speaking up at work, don't stay quiet just because powerful people are in the room. Emma had never been impressed by titles. She believed a man's character was measured by what he did when silence would be easier. Daniel rubbed both hands over his face. He needed the money Crane had just taken away. He needed stability for Lily. He needed to keep the garage from closing, but none of that changed what he had seen. If the SVX-12R went live on camera with a hidden pressure fault and a bypassed shutdown path, the best outcome was humiliation. The worst outcome was shrapnel, fire, and someone's child waiting outside another room. There were normal channels. Daniel knew that there were forms, supervisors, compliance inboxes, and safety committees. There were also 18 hours before the investor livestream rehearsal became the real launch demonstration. And the people in charge of those channels were the same people who had stood around the engine while the wrong seal sat in plain sight. Daniel scrolled through contacts he had not used in years until he found one he had never expected to call again. Samuel Crane, retired founder, chairman emeritus, the man who had created the performance division before Vanessa inherited its spotlight. Most employees thought Samuel was gone for good. Daniel knew better. In the original charter, Samuel had kept an emergency safety veto after a test accident nearly destroyed the company in its early years. Daniel stepped outside the garage so Lily would not wake to the sound of the call. The night air was cold. Across the lot, a streetlight flickered over the storage units. He pressed the number and waited. It rang 6 times. Then a rough, older voice answered. Annoyed and awake. Who is this? Daniel closed his eyes for 1 second. Mr. Crane. This is Daniel Mercer. I worked VX safety calibration under Halden's group. I know it has been years. Silence. In. Then. Mercer. The name was not warm, but it was remembered. Why are you calling me at this hour? Daniel looked back through the garage window at Lily, asleep under Emma's old jacket. Because SVX-12R is being prepared for launch with a pressure rail seal that does not match its variance history. And I saw a Mercer safe Rev 9 plate under the rear bracket. Samuel did not speak. Daniel knew that kind of silence. It was the sound of a man no longer half listening. Say that again, Samuel said. Daniel did. Then he added the second detail. The rail tag was red, but the clip pattern was post-fail inspection, not pre-pass. Someone swapped the visible indicator. Samuel's breathing changed. Who signed it off? Owen Pike's team. Do you have proof? Daniel looked at his phone. Then at the garage computer through the window, I have old Rev 9 reference files. I saw the current plate location today before they fired me. Another pause. They fired you. Daniel's voice stayed even. For touching the engine to stop the startup prep. Samuel cursed once. Quietly. Send what you have. No. Daniel went inside, scanned the old note, took a photo of the Rev9 diagram, and attached a written statement of exactly what he had observed. Wrong seal. Hidden plate. Owen blocking line of sight. Vanessa ordering him removed. Launch schedule imminent. He did not exaggerate. He knew exaggeration gives liars a place to hide. He sent the files and waited by the workbench while Lily slept. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. At 11 minutes. His phone rang again. This time Samuel's voice was not annoyed. It was cold. I am calling the garage. At Crane Velocity Motors. The launch garage had not gone quiet after Daniel left. It had gotten buzzier. Owen had ordered the team to reset the camera angles, replace the access shroud, and prepare for another startup rehearsal before morning. Vanessa stood near the engine with a tablet in her hand, speaking to a communications director about confidence, momentum, and not allowing a contractor incident to infect the narrative. The SVX-12R sat under the lights. Still dead. Still waiting. A junior technician reached for the rear rail cover, and Owen snapped. Leave that side alone. Nina Park, QA compliance manager, heard it from the edge of the bay and looked up from her checklist. Then the wall phone rang. No one used that line unless it came from board security or founder access. Marcus Bell, head of operations, answered first. His posture changed before he spoke. Ms. Crane, he said, holding out the receiver. It's your grandfather. Vanessa's face tightened with irritation before she took it. Samuel, this is not a good time. Whatever he said back made the irritation vanish. She looked at Owen. Owen looked at the engine. Marcus switched the call to speaker at Samuel's command. And the old founder's voice filled the launch garage like a door slamming shut. Who approved the SVX-12R sign-off with the Rev9 bypass condition unresolved? Samuel asked. No one moved. Vanessa recovered first. We do not have an unresolved condition. We had a disruption from a temporary worker who misunderstood what he saw. Samuel's voice did not rise. That made it worse. I am looking at the original Rev9 reference now. Do not insult me with public relations language. Owen stepped forward. Too fast. Sir. With respect, the rail variance was within presentational tolerance. The startup would not be under load. Nina looked down at her checklist. Her hand tightened around the pen. Daniel had been right. Presentational tolerance was not a safety category. It was a phrase people invented when they needed a bad result to sound temporary. Samuel heard it too. Who changed the visible seal? Owen's mouth opened, then closed. Vanessa stared at him. The engineers behind him stopped pretending to work. For the first time all day, the dead engine was not the only dead thing in the room. The confidence had died with it. Samuel spoke again. Each word slower now. Cancel the launch. Lock down that engine bay. Preserve every log, every camera angle, every sign-off sheet, and every access record from the last 72 hours. Vanessa gripped the edge of the table. Samuel, you cannot do this 5 hours before investor arrival. I can, Samuel said. The charter says I can when safety sign-off is compromised. Owen tried one last time. Sir, if we delay, we lose the round. The silence after that sentence was small, but it was fatal. Samuel's voice came through the speaker with the weight of a man who had built the room everyone else was standing in. Then you should have thought of that before hiding a fail condition. The garage went utterly still. Samuel continued, Ruth Alvarez is on her way. Until council arrives. No one touches SVX-12R. And Owen. Listen carefully. Fire every one of them involved in that sign-off. Vanessa's eyes widened. Marcus looked at the floor. Nina stopped breathing for a second. The engineers who had laughed when Daniel was fired now stared at the engine as if it had betrayed them. Back at Mercer Auto and Repair, Daniel stood beside the workbench with the phone against his ear. He heard the silence through the line. He did not smile. He did not pump his fist. He only looked toward Lily, still asleep under Emma's jacket, and let out a breath he had been holding since Vanessa said he was done. Samuel came back on the line. Mercer, do not speak to the press. Do not post a word. You will receive a formal request to return as an emergency consultant under legal protection. Daniel looked at the lease notice on the edge of the desk, then at the old Rev 9 file glowing on the computer screen. I'll need it in writing, he said. Samuel gave a short sound that was almost approval. Good. You learned something since the old days. When Daniel ended the call, Lily stirred. Dad, she whispered. He crossed the room and knelt beside her. Go back to sleep. She blinked at him, still half in a dream. Did the engine get fixed? Daniel brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. No, he said. But it stopped being hidden. Lily's fingers closed around the blue toy car again. Are you still fired? Daniel looked toward the open garage door, where the night outside suddenly felt less heavy. I think, he said softly, that part is about to change. Across town, red access lights switched on above the crane launch garage. Marcus Bell locked the doors. Nina Park stood alone by the QA desk, staring at a file name she had been told to ignore. Owen Pike was on his phone, whispering fast, already trying to save himself. Vanessa Crane stood in front of the SVX, 1-2R with her arms crossed. Furious, not because the engine had failed, but because a man she had thrown out had reached someone she could not bully. Then Ruth Alvarez, board legal counsel, stepped out of the elevator with 2 assistants and a sealed evidence kit. No one leaves with documents, she said. No one deletes anything. And no one touches that engine until Mr. Mercer returns under agreement. The first battle was over. The launch was frozen. The garage was locked down. And the single dad they had fired for touching a dead engine had just become the only man who could explain why it should not be brought back to life. By sunrise, Crane Velocity Motors no longer looked like a company preparing for a launch. It looked like a building holding its breath. The banners were still up in the lobby, promising the future of American performance. But the employees walking beneath them had stopped smiling at the slogan. The investor livestream stage remained half-built upstairs. Lights were aimed. Cameras were covered. Caterers whispered near silver trays no one wanted to touch. Down in the launch garage, the Crane VX-12 prototype engine, Unit SVX-12R, sat on its black steel test stand under sealed red access lights. Matte black covers open. Metallic pipes cold. Pressure rail untouched since Samuel Crane's order came through the speaker. A dead engine can sometimes make more noise than a running one. That morning, every person in the building heard it. Daniel Mercer arrived at 8:17 with his daughter's blue toy car in the pocket of his jacket. Lily had put it there before he left the garage. Not as a toy, but as a kind of courage she could lend him. He had tried to leave it on the workbench. She had shaken her head and said, "Take it so you remember I know you didn't do something bad." Daniel had not trusted himself to answer. So he had kissed her forehead and driven back to the company that had thrown him out less than 24 hours earlier. This time, security did not stand close to remind him he was unwanted. Marcus Bell met him at the entrance with a visitor badge already printed and a face that had lost some of yesterday's certainty. "Mr. Mercer," Marcus said. "Ruth Alvarez is waiting downstairs." Daniel looked at the badge. It did not say contractor. It did not say cleanup support. It said emergency safety consultant. The words were temporary, laminated, and probably printed in a hurry. But they changed the way the receptionist looked at him. They changed the way 2 engineers near the elevator turned away from his eyes. Daniel clipped it to his shirt without pride. A badge could open a door. It could not prove a man. He had learned that long ago. "Is Lily safe at school?" Marcus asked. Awkwardly, Daniel nodded. For now, Marcus looked like he wanted to apologize, but did not know which part to choose. So he only opened the elevator and stepped aside. Ruth Alvarez stood in the launch garage beside Samuel Crane, who had arrived in person sometime before dawn. Samuel was 72, silver-haired, broad-shouldered despite age. With a cane, he used less for walking than for reminding people where the floor was. Vanessa stood across from him in a white suit instead of yesterday's black, as if changing color could change the story. Owen Pike was there too, pale and angry, arms folded so tightly his knuckles showed. Nina Park stood near the QA terminal with a folder pressed against her stomach. She did not look at Daniel when he entered, but her eyes flicked toward the SVX, 1-2R, and then down at the floor. Fear has a language. Daniel had heard enough of it in shops to know when someone was holding back the truth. Ruth placed a document on the work table. "Mr. Mercer, before you touch anything or identify anything, we have terms. Consultant access under board authority. Limited to safety verification. Liability protection for pre-existing conditions. Payment authorization of $60,000 for emergency review and testimony. You will not repair the engine today. You will not start it. You will identify risk chain and evidence points." Daniel read the first page. Then the second. He asked 2 questions about legal exposure. One about Lily being dragged into any media narrative, and one about whether the agreement protected him from retaliation if his findings embarrassed executives. Ruth answered all 4 clearly. Vanessa's mouth tightened at the word retaliation. Daniel signed. Samuel watched him with an expression Daniel could not read. "You always asked better questions than men twice your title," the old founder said. Daniel closed the pen and handed it back. Titles never kept anybody safe. Samuel nodded once, and the room shifted again. It was a small thing, but everyone heard the respect in the silence after it. Vanessa did too. "Can we proceed?" she asked. Voice clipped. "Some of us still have investors upstairs expecting an explanation." Ruth turned to her. "They will get one. Whether it is the one you prepared depends on the evidence." Vanessa looked away first. Daniel approached the SVX, 1-2R slowly. He did not bring drama with him. He brought a small flashlight, a folded printout of his old Rev 9 reference, and the kind of patience that makes guilty people restless. He asked Marcus to stand at the left camera angle, Ruth to record the chain of custody, and Nina to open the QA variance terminal without deleting or editing anything. Owen objected immediately. "Nina is not authorized to expose raw development logs to an outside consultant." Ruth looked at him. "The board authorized it." Owen pointed at Daniel. "He was fired yesterday for interfering with launch prep." Samuel tapped his cane once. "He was fired yesterday for noticing what your team did not want noticed." Choose your next sentence carefully. No one laughed this time. Daniel looked under the rear pressure rail without touching the line itself. The small calibration plate was exactly where he remembered seeing it, half hidden behind the bracket. He asked Marcus to angle the inspection mirror. The plate caught the light. Mercer safe, Rev no. Not large. Not decorative. Just a safety marker placed where an engineer would look when a system mattered more than a press event. Daniel pointed to it. "This plate belongs to a shutdown logic package that cannot be bypassed during live startup conditions. If it is present, the system either runs under Rev 9 limits or it does not run for demonstration." That was the rule. Owen scoffed. "Old rule. New control map." Daniel did not turn. "Then show the approved override." Nina's hands froze on the keyboard. That was the first crack. Ruth noticed. Samuel noticed. Vanessa noticed last. And when she did, her eyes narrowed at Nina instead of Owen. "Open the override approval," Ruth said. Nina typed slowly. The terminal loaded a file tree. VX Undo our pressure rail validation. Startup presentational tolerance. Public demo checklist. Override approval. Nina clicked it. A red warning appeared, file unavailable. Owen stepped forward. The archive server has been unstable all week. Daniel looked at the screen. Open revision history. Owen snapped. That is unnecessary. Nina clicked before he could stop her. There it was. A failed pressure variance log from 2 nights earlier. Overwritten at 1143 p.m. by a user credential tied to Owen's engineering group. The original note had not disappeared completely. Systems forget less than people hope. Ruth leaned closer. The room seemed to shrink around the monitor. Nina's face had gone pale. Daniel read only the line that mattered. Rear rail pressure spike exceeded safe demo tolerance. Do not proceed without shutdown verification. He looked at Vanessa. A disagreement doesn't overwrite a fail log. The words were quiet, but they cut deeper than shouting. Vanessa turned to Owen. Explain. Owen's confidence cracked at the edges. It was a preliminary flag. We had mitigation. Daniel pointed to the engine. Then why was the visible seal swapped? Marcus stepped in before Owen answered. I can confirm access activity. Everyone turned. Marcus looked uncomfortable. But the truth had already started moving and he had decided not to stand in front of it. After Mr. Mercer was removed yesterday. I reviewed the lockdown camera history. The rear rail indicator was changed at 6:12 yesterday morning, before the investor rehearsal. Camera angle 4 shows 2 engineers at the rail. One of them is from Owen's sign-off team. Owen turned red. You reviewed security footage without my authorization. Marcus stared at him. You are not my authorization during a safety lockdown. Samuel almost smiled. But the expression never reached his eyes. Nina lowered the folder she had been holding since Daniel walked in. There is more, she said. Her voice was small, but in that room it sounded enormous. Vanessa spoke first. Nina, be very careful. Nina swallowed. I have been careful. That is why I made a copy. She placed the folder on the table and opened it. Inside were printed QA notes, a timeline of pressure variance flags, and an email chain in which Owen's deputy wrote that delaying the launch would spook the expansion round. Nina's signature appeared on one line. Not as approval, but as an objection. I filed a hold recommendation, she said. It was removed from the launch packet. Daniel watched her face as she spoke. Fear was still there. But now it had company. Shame. Relief. Maybe courage. Vanessa took one step back from the table. This is an internal process failure, not a public scandal. Samuel's cane struck the floor again. An internal process failure is a missing purchase order. This is a near demonstration of an unsafe prototype in front of investors. Staff. And cameras. Ruth closed the folder. We need the board upstairs now. Vanessa turned sharply. No. We do not drag investors into raw development issues. Daniel finally looked at her directly. They were coming to watch the engine start. They were already in it. For the first time since he had known her. Vanessa had no immediate answer. The board session was moved into the Heritage presentation room because the investors were already gathered there, murmuring over coffee and waiting for an explanation about the canceled live stream. The room had been designed for victory. A black curtain framed the stage. Screens showed paused renderings of the VX-12 program. At the center, under a temporary work light instead of theatrical lighting, the SVX-12R engine was rolled in on its stand by Marcus and 2 neutral technicians. It looked smaller there than it had in the launch garage, but somehow more serious. A polished show engine can invite applause. A sealed test engine under evidence tags invites questions. Daniel stood near the engine. Not on stage, but close enough to identify what mattered. Lily was not meant to attend. but Samuel had asked Daniel whether he wanted her nearby after school. Daniel hesitated until Ruth assured him no cameras would be active and no press would enter. So Lily sat in the back beside a quiet HR director, holding the blue toy car with both hands. She looked frightened at first, then focused, as if she had decided that if adults were going to judge her father, she would judge them back. Daniel saw her and felt the toy car in his pocket was gone because it had returned to its owner. That felt right. Samuel opened the session himself. This morning's launch demonstration has been suspended under the Emergency Safety Authority and the Crane Performance Charter. You will hear why. Vanessa stood beside him, stiff with contained fury. Owen sat with his legal representative, staring at the table. Ruth summarized the process. Then she asked Daniel to identify the safety concern. He did not give a speech. He pointed to three things. First, the Mercer Safe Rev 9 plate under the rear pressure rail. Second, the visible rail seal that had been swapped before rehearsal. Third, the overwritten fail log showing an unsafe pressure spike. He explained each in plain language. The engine was not dead because it lacked talent around it, he said. It was being pushed silent because the truth was inconvenient. An investor raised a hand. Are you saying the demonstration could have harmed people in the room? Daniel did not exaggerate. I am saying the recorded pressure behavior required shutdown verification before any live demo. Skipping that step made the risk unacceptable. Nina then confirmed the overwritten QA hold recommendation. Marcus confirmed the camera timeline. Ruth confirmed the file history. Samuel confirmed the charter rule that made the shutdown mandatory. The pieces came together without music, without thunder, without anyone needing to shout. That made it worse for the guilty. Lies often survive chaos. They struggle in orderly rooms where each fact is placed gently beside the next. Vanessa tried to rescue the frame one last time. No one intended harm. The company was under extraordinary pressure. The investor round supports thousands of jobs. Daniel looked toward Lily in the back, then back at Vanessa. Pressure does not make a false pass become true. The room went silent. It was the second silence. And the deeper one. Yesterday, the garage had gone quiet when Samuel's voice ordered the launch frozen. Today, the room went silent because everyone understood why Daniel had been fired. Not because he was reckless. Because he was early. Because he saw a danger before it became a headline. Because a room full of important people had almost traded safety for timing. Samuel stood. He did not look like a retired man then. He looked like the founder whose name still held weight because he had remembered what it was supposed to stand for. Owen Pike is terminated effective immediately for falsification and suppression of safety records, pending further legal review. Any team member found to have participated in the seal swap, log overwrite, or false sign-off will be removed from the VX program and referred to counsel. Vanessa Crane will step back from operational control of the VX-12 launch while the board conducts a full safety audit. The expansion round is delayed until independent verification is complete. He turned toward the investors. If that costs us money, then it is the cheapest lesson this company will ever buy. No one clapped. It was not that kind of moment. Owen stared at the table as if the wood might open and let him disappear. Vanessa's face stayed composed, but the blood had drained from it. She had not been fired. And that mattered for plausibility. For boards rarely burn down a company in one morning. But she had lost the launch, the narrative, the division's trust, and the right to pretend Daniel Mercer was just a fired contractor. That consequence hurt her more than a shouted insult ever could. Investors closed folders. Some looked angry. Some looked relieved. All of them looked at the engine differently. The SVX-12R was no longer the centerpiece of a performance launch. It was the witness that stopped one. After the room cleared, Lily walked toward Daniel slowly. She did not run. She was old enough to understand that something serious had happened, but young enough to need her father's face to tell her whether it was safe to breathe. Daniel knelt before she reached him. "Hey, Bluebird," he said, using the nickname Emma had given her. Lily held up the toy car. "I kept it safe." Daniel smiled. And this time it did not look forced. "You always do." She looked past him at the engine. "Did it almost hurt people?" Daniel thought about soft answers and decided she deserved a true one made gentle. "It might have. That is why we stopped it." Samuel approached them then. Slower than before. His cane tapping once every few steps. He looked at Lily. Not over her head the way many adults do. "Your father did the bravest job in the room," he said. Lily studied him carefully. "But they fired him." Samuel nodded. "Sometimes people fire the warning because they do not like what it means." Lily looked at Daniel. "Are you still fired?" Daniel glanced at Ruth, who stood near the table with a signed envelope in her hand. Ruth smiled slightly. "No. Your father is under emergency consultant contract. And I believe several people owe him an apology." Daniel accepted the envelope but did not open it. Money could wait a few more minutes. Lily could not. Later that evening, Daniel used part of the consultant advance to pay the garage arrears and Lily's school balance. The receipt from the landlord was plain and unimpressive, printed on cheap paper with fading ink. But Daniel folded it carefully and placed it in the same drawer where Emma used to keep customer keys. The garage did not transform overnight. The lift still groaned. The office light still flickered. The coffee maker still burned everything after 20 minutes. But the air felt different because the future had stopped leaning so hard against the door. Lily placed her blue toy car on the workbench and rolled it once between two sockets. "Dad," she said, "when Miss Crane fired you, I thought maybe everyone would believe her." Daniel sat beside her on the stool. "I know. Were you scared?" He looked around the garage. At the overdue notices now stamped paid. At the tools he had almost lost. At the little girl trying to understand how dignity survives being humiliated. "Yes," he said. "Doing the right thing does not always feel brave while you are doing it. Sometimes it just feels lonely." Lily nodded as if that made more sense than any heroic speech would have. "Mom would have said you had to tell." Daniel's throat tightened. He looked at the blue toy car, then at the empty office chair where Emma used to sit. "She did say that. A long time ago." The next week, Daniel and Lily returned once more to Crane Velocity Motors. Not for a launch. Not for cameras. And not for applause. Samuel had asked Daniel to review a new safety procedure before independent auditors arrived. The SVX-12R was still on the stand. Still not running. But now it was surrounded by honest labels, open logs, and people who moved around it with caution instead of arrogance. Vanessa was not there. Owen's badge no longer opened the doors. Nina Park had been appointed interim QA lead for the audit. And Marcus gave Daniel a small nod when he entered. No one called him contractor. No one called him cleanup staff. They called him Mr. Mercer. Lily stood beside the engine, careful not to touch anything, and held up her blue toy car as if comparing two very different machines. "Will this one ever run?" she asked. Daniel looked at the SVX-12R, at the pressure rail that had started everything, at the small hidden plate that had spoken louder than executives. "Maybe," he said, "when it is safe, and not before." Lily smiled a little. "That sounds like you." Daniel laughed softly. It surprised him. The sound felt rusty, but real. He put one hand on her shoulder and looked toward the engine bay where his warning had become evidence. His firing had become a contract, and his humiliation had become a lesson his daughter would carry. As they walked out, Lily slipped her small hand into his. The glass building still towered over them. The investors would return someday. The engine might run someday. Crane Velocity Motors would rebuild its launch story with lawyers, auditors, and quieter promises. But Daniel did not need the building to fall for justice to be real. He only needed the truth to stand taller than the lie. Outside. The evening light caught the blue toy car in Lily's other hand. She looked up and asked, "So if someone powerful is wrong, we still tell the truth?" Daniel squeezed her hand. "Yes," he said. "Especially then. And this time." When they left Crane Velocity Motors, no guard followed them. No executive laughed. And the single dad who had been fired for touching a dead engine walked beside his daughter like a man who had never needed permission to be worth something.